Good afternoon, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this edition of the Provost Conversations in Teaching and Learning. As we have noticed, the sun is shining. That bright light out there is actually sun, and I think at 12:57, if I'm not mistaken, it will become officially spring. Oh. So we shall pause for a moment in honour of that, perhaps. You know. By the time we leave, it'll be officially spring, which is a great thing. Today we have Dr. Richard Landers, who's going to be talking to us about some of his work on mid-semester evaluations, which is something that's very dear to my heart. That's something that I was introduced to more decades ago than I want to talk about. But I've certainly personally found it very helpful, and I've encouraged others to do the same, so I'm certainly looking forward to today's talk. Dr. Landers is Assistant Professor of Industrial and Organizational Psychology, and he conducts his work in the area of mainly technology-enhanced learning. Apart from his receipt of the 2013 Teaching with Technology Award here from ODU, he was also nominated, one of the university's nominations to SCHEV for the Outstanding Faculty Award in the area of teaching with technology, which is going away, I'm told. So there will be no such award in future. But it shows the level of experience and expertise that Dr. Landers has. So I'm sure that in the next hour we'll learn a good bit about what you've been doing. I understand that Dr. Landers has also written a textbook, which is not actually on this topic, right, but on statistics for business students. Yes. Which is good. Business students should know some statistics, so I'm glad that we do. But I'm looking forward to today, and certainly looking forward to seeing how we can engage in a discussion about the usefulness of this kind of approach to getting feedback from students. So look forward to your talk. Thank you.
Thank you. So welcome. I am going here to again to talk to you about both, in fact, end of semester evaluations and mid-semester evaluations, based a little bit actually in IO psychology. Now, what IO psychology is, because that's not a term almost anybody in here will know, is the application of psychology to business. So it's specifically trying to understand, for example, performance appraisal processes, how do we conduct assessment in the workplace. And there are a lot of parallel themes, though, with education. So I found myself dipping into this sphere here lately. My specific research program, as you just heard, is in the use of technology in selection and adult learning. I give you this setup. I tell you about this because the conclusions that I'm going to be talking about are largely drawn from this IO psychology literature. I'm not myself an education researcher. Instead, I'm taking this, I guess, kind of an interdisciplinary perspective in applying what we know about IO psychology, about how people make ratings, about how people make judgments about others, and applying that in this evaluative context. So the impetus for this, the reason that I became interested originally was that I noted that evaluations were not giving me the kind of information I wanted out of them. When I looked at end of semester evaluations, they were uneven in both quality and accuracy. On the quantitative side, from an IO psychology perspective, that wasn't that surprising. We actually know in IO psychology, if you give a training program to employees and you want to know, was my training program successful, that's actually a very complicated question. The major model that's used is one by Kirkpatrick, and it suggests that there are 4 levels of evaluation in organizational context for evaluating whether or not training was successful. The low end, which is student evaluations, are reactions. Did people like it? Do they evaluate it affectively? Did they have positive reactions to the training, to the learning that they just experienced? In business, these are somewhat disparagingly referred to as smile sheets, because usually what happens in business is somebody says, I liked it, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, and they don't really actually pay attention to the content of those ratings. The next level up is learning, which is more grade-based. The next level up, which we don't see very often in education, is behavior. Did the results of the training actually change what people do, not just what people know? And the final level was results. Was there a monetary kind of return on investment kind of angle? Here, that's in educational context, that's probably more of the was the amount I paid for my degree worth it? So that's many steps removed now from an individual course. So that's one piece. We're only evaluating one little narrow aspect of how people react to this learning opportunity. So that's one downside to end of semester evaluations. The other is this idea of halo. What halo is a what we call a psychometric error, which is to say it's when people are making judgments about something that they want to make ratings on. So when they're filling out an end of semester evaluation form, instead of actually going question by question and thinking, was it strong in this regard? Was it weak in this regard? Was it strong in this regard? It's much more common instead to make a halo judgment. Did I like the course? Did I not like the course? And then just respond straight down one of those answers. So you might have noticed that this has a number of effects. One of them is creating what's called a bimodal distribution of evaluation scores. And you see a lot of people have 5s and 4s, and then there's just a couple of people with like 1s over here. This weird double-sided distribution. And the reason for that is not because those ratings of all 1s means that you were universally terrible, but rather because this person has decided that they don't like your instruction for whatever reason, and then instead of actually answering the questions, they just go 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. I hated this. This is the worst experience I ever had. Whereas that's not really reflective of their actual experience in the course. So those kind of rater errors, when they're trying to make judgments, about the course, are very frustrating because that makes it very difficult to interpret what the numbers actually tell you. The other side of that, if we say, okay, so there's some downsides to quantitative measures, there's downsides to numbers being evaluated, maybe we can look for the qualitative measures, well, then we still have some problems. Even when the feedback quality is good, it is typically lacking in detail. When we get evaluations from students and they say, I really love the course, what do you do with that? What is the actual actionable piece of the puzzle to solve at that point? So some examples from courses I've taught. This is in response to the question, what changes could be made to help you learn more? Add better information to help prepare for exams. What information? What would be better? What do you want to know? These are all the questions that go through my head when I read this, but I actually can't tell from that alone what the right response is. Simpler explanations for complex material. Well, what was the complex material? What would you like to be simpler? Did you even put the effort in for me to know that this is a problem on my end and not your end? I have none of that detail to be able to actually evaluate, does this mean for me I should change something? That's the conclusion I want to be able to draw. But just from these statements alone, very difficult. The other side, what did you like most about the class and instructor? I liked how the course was organized. Equally not helpful. What about it did you like? How was it organized? How does this compare to courses that weren't organized, and how did that help or harm your ability to participate in the course? Assignments were clear. Which assignments? How were they clear? All of these subsequent questions come up whenever we look at these end of semester evaluations. But the problem is that at that point, when we're at the end of the semester, we can't ask them. We're done. The course is over. And it's very hard to get detail, even when good comments exist. So why might this happen? Why might we have poor qualitative responses? And there are a number of reasons for this. One is that they are meaningless to the students very personally, unless those students are altruistic, attached, or vengeful. Those are the students that fill out evaluations most of the time, because at the end of the semester, there's no reason. They don't really care. They're doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They're volunteering. Oh, I'll provide feedback. But they're more likely to do that if they just really loved your course, which is the attached side, if they really hated your course, which is the vengeful side, or if they're altruistic, they say, oh, I want to give back. Unfortunately, that doesn't represent the full spectrum of students in our courses. That's going to be a very narrow window. So you end up getting more of that kind of bimodal problem, where you end up having a lot of people that really loved it and a few people that really hated it. But those are the ones that end up fulfilling the evaluations, and then you get really inaccurate assessment. Another reason, it's very difficult for students to empathize with both the instructor and with each other. They don't know what you want to know. When you ask a question like, what did you like most about the course? That's pretty vague. That allows them to interpret that however they want. They can't empathize with you because they've never been an instructor, so they don't know what it is that you're looking for. At the same time, they don't know what other students experience either. They think that their experience is the experience of the course. And we probably all had the experience of a single student saying, this was so hard, everybody in this class struggled, this was a terrible experience for all of us, when in reality it's that one student was struggling. And you want to help that one student, but it doesn't mean that it reflects the overall experience of everybody in the course. So these sometimes result in poor quality, qualitative and quantitative feedback. So why should we care and what should we do about it? So quantitative data are precise, but qualitative data are rich. So we want to improve the quality of both if we can. We want to have the metrics so that we can see from semester to semester, do I have at least a sense of, is this course doing about the same as it used to? But we also want to have that rich qualitative data so that we can figure out specifically what should I do? What should my actions be? How should I tinker with this course as it evolves? So the other side of this, student evaluations, the documents themselves are often used administratively, which is to say as a job performance measure. And there are some downsides to that, especially for our full-time lecturer staff and our adjunct faculty. From the perspective of I.O., trying to get developmental feedback out of an administrative measure is not a good idea. We know from research on supervisors that supervisors are not going to rate their supervisees accurately when they know that those ratings could get that person fired or get that person a raise or get some other sort of outcome. So they'll actually modify, they'll fudge their answers. And it plays out in all sorts of strange ways in businesses that we don't have to worry about here. Like, for example, when managers are judged based on the ratings of their subordinates, which is insane. But that means if they rate all their subordinates with all 5s, then that means that their store is likely to get a bonus and all sorts of weird stuff. So we don't have to worry about that. But we do have to worry about this idea that the students, if they think about it, may conclude that if I rate this person really badly, I can get them fired. That's the conclusion a lot of students go to. Or if I rate this person perfectly across the board, then something good will happen to them, and I want them to feel good because I had a good experience. Both of those are terrible. We don't want either of those things to happen because both of those mean inaccuracy. It means that they're going to fudge their numbers one way or another because they have a goal with the way they're making their ratings. They're not trying to accurately represent what you did. They're instead trying to make something happen, and that corrupts the value of what they're giving you. So we're compelled to improve these evaluations, but just because we have the evaluation, just because we have these numbers, just because we have these words, doesn't imply that performance is improved just because they go up as a result of this. If you, one of my favorite studies this actually wasn't in education, was a number of years ago, they randomly assigned sections of the same class to either, right before they filled out student evaluations, to either get candy or get nothing. And they found that when the students got candy, the ratings were higher. So that should give you a clue then as to just how much corruption there is in these ratings potentially. It's a mood intervention. You're trying to put them in a good mood so they make better ratings. And it works. It works because of all these kind of flaws with evaluative systems that we've been talking about. So just because the numbers go up doesn't mean that the course is better. That's the important conclusion there. So it's useful perhaps to reframe the course, reframe the evaluations and how they're used. So one option, of course, is to get rid of administrative evaluations. Don't think that's going to happen. So as long as we must have administrative evaluations, that means the next best step is to add in developmental evaluations. Evaluations that have no specific administrative outcome, that if the student fills them out, the only outcome for them is maybe the course will be better. That's the only thing that will happen as a result of those evaluations, and it takes out all of those administrative corruptions that we can potentially get in those scores and those ratings. So that's what led me to mid-semester evaluations. When we do a mid-semester evaluation, we can tell the student, only I'm going to see this, only I'm going to get impact from this, only I'm going to be interpreting this, and maybe the course will be better as a result of your filling it out. And those are a lot of advantages to using mid-semester evaluations that we don't get with end-of-semester evaluations. It adds a sense of meaning, this idea that there's a consequence. If you fill out this form, you might have a better experience. That's very compelling to a lot of students. It also doesn't provide this opportunity to punish or reward faculty. Instead, it is purely, do you want to make the course better for you? And that's a really good reason for them to be filling out these evaluations. Much more likely to get high quality information. And so then we still have the administrative end of semester evaluations, but not a whole lot we can do there, unfortunately. So In terms of, so that's in terms of getting good quality feedback, but what other good outcomes might we get out of doing this? Job performance ratings, in IO psychology, when we talk about job performance ratings, one of our goals is to make them as accurate as possible, but there are many reasons they are inaccurate, one of which I think applies really well here, which is awareness. Supervisors make ratings of their employees, and one of the major reasons that those ratings are not accurate is because they don't see everything that their employees do. They only get a very narrow little window into the workday of each of their employees. The same is true here. When giving evaluation, the student is only aware of what is communicated directly with them about your teaching, which means they're going to see, if it's online, they're going to see lecture videos, they're going to see prepared material, they're going to see exams. If it's in person, they're going to see you in person, they're going to have nonverbal cues, they're going to have all that kind of information, but they don't know any of the behind the scenes information. They don't know how much the emails you're sending, they don't know the struggle that you've had thinking of the perfect test questions or the perfect activities. They know none of that. And they should, because that is part of what they're reacting to. So if this awareness is the big challenge, and in the conclusion here, if students don't know what you do for them, nobody served well. The students don't know how much work you're putting in. You are getting inaccurate ratings because the students aren't rating all the work you're putting in, and the people that are making job performance judgments on the basis of your evaluations at the end of the semester are getting inaccurate ratings. So no one is doing well. That doesn't help anyone. So this is all based in the idea of what's called organizational justice theory, which is a theory in IO psychology that talks about how people believe they're being treated fairly. In organizational justice theory, there are these four major components. The first of them is distributive justice. Do I feel like I got what I deserved? And if this is true, if people feel like they got what they deserved, then the rest of this doesn't matter. So the situation where this really applies is when people feel they've been treated unfairly. And in our context, that means I got a grade I didn't like. That's usually what happens. So I didn't get the grade I liked. I didn't do as well in this course as I thought I should have. That's where we have low distributive justice. And so what happens with low distributive justice is that within these other three components become much more important. Procedural justice, the first of these, was the decision-making process fair? Was the way that my grade was determined a fair process? That would be the kind of question they would ask themselves. Informational justice, was I told everything about this situation? So that's another component. And interpersonal justice, was I told compassionately and respectfully about the reward or the punishment that I was to receive. It was a really fascinating study in IO psychology on this topic. We had multiple organizations, and in these multiple organizations, one of them was going to have a temporary pay cut. And so what the researchers did is they randomly assigned, and there's maybe some ethical issues there, but they randomly assigned one organization to have a temporary work furlough, essentially. They assigned another organization as a control, so nothing happened. And in the other organization, they still had the temporary furlough, but the CEO of the company came out in a big meeting with the entire group and said, "I'm so sorry, there's nothing we can do. We've gone through every possible option to avoid this, and there's no other option. We absolutely must do this furlough. You're going to have to take pay cuts. It's going to be bad, and I'm so sorry," etc. So that's what we would call an informational and interpersonal justice intervention. We're trying to make sure people understand what's happened. And what they then did was track theft. Now, the people that were still in the organization, they tracked during the problem, while there was this pay cut and work furlough, did people steal more from the office? And what they found is in the office where all they did is said, "There's a pay cut, too bad for you." There was no intervention, informational, interpersonal intervention. Theft went way up. But in the group that was told, "I'm so sorry, there was nothing we could do," theft barely changed at all. So what that shows is the power of this communication in affecting how people view whether or not they've been treated fairly. And that's a very important conclusion here, because even when students are treated fairly, they may not know it. And that's one of the biggest challenges that I think that we can address using mid-semester evaluation strategies. So, mid-semester feedback also provides three specific opportunities. One, you can help students understand why course-related decisions have been made. That's that justice intervention. That's that procedural justice intervention. Why did you make what I view as being an unfair thing happen to me? And you say, well, because I have to treat all the students the same, we have to have the same policy across everybody, I can't make exceptions for you, those kind of things that we do, that can all be communicated through responses to mid-semester evaluations. 2, you can engage in additional information gathering, uncorrupted by this administrative side of it. So you can get useful, valuable, valid information out of student evaluations that won't have those, I'm trying to get this person in trouble kind of side effect to it. So here we can get away with that without that downside. And finally, we can actually open a dialogue with the students about learning. As I mentioned toward the beginning, one of the big challenges with the qualitative feedback that we get on end of semester evaluations is it stops. With the course is over, we're done, and I want to know more. With mid-semester evaluations, this is the first opening move in a discussion with the students as to what's going on. It doesn't necessarily mean that whatever the student says is right. It doesn't mean when they say this is too hard that it really is too hard, but rather it's that opening salvo to say, well, let's talk about this. Let's see why you think it's hard and see if there's something else that we can do to help you with the course. So it treats feedback then as a process rather than as an event. And this is another big finding in IO psychology, this idea that when we treat feedback as an event, it's a thing that happens to you. When we treat feedback like that, nobody improves. Because when it's a single time, I'm going to get some numbers, I'm going to talk about it with someone, or I'm not going to talk about it with someone, but there's a single point in time where I get these numbers and then it's over, people don't improve. Instead, the improvement relies on the idea of feedback being treated as a process, as a back and forth, as a developmental opportunity, as a situation where we can collect information, consider that information carefully, act on it, and then see how our changes affect our job afterward. So, I actually tested this idea in the context of a large online course. It's 125 student enrollment in this particular course that I'm going to show you a little video from as to how we did it. Weekly modules involve 2 lecture videos plus readings plus a quiz on in every week. 3 multiple choice written combination exams. There was also a term project that they had to do that I didn't write about here. One of the important parts of the course, though, is that every week I post a little video, it's about 5 minutes long, about here's what to expect. It's like the sort of equivalent to the first 5 or 10 minutes that you would normally have in a class. Here's the stuff that's coming up today. Here's the stuff that we're talking about. Here's what you should worry about. So I have these little videos normally. And what I did in this course is that in addition to that little video, I said, after we did the mid-semester evaluation, I said, we're going to next have this optional video. You don't have to watch it if you want. But I'm just going to spend a little bit of time going through the mid-semester evaluations that we conducted. And I'm going to talk through it. I'm going to just discuss my reactions and my findings from that mid-semester evaluation. So let me show you that video.
Next question, we have a little bit of a split opinion. The format of the course has been helpful to the way that I learn. Most people agreed, we've got mostly 4s, but we also have a sizable group in the disagree and the strongly disagree, and also a fair group that strongly agree. It's leaning more toward the agree side, so that's what I want to see. But I'm honestly not sure what to change to make that any better. So hopefully, we're talking about your written responses later, so perhaps some of those issues are why people disagree with that question. And hopefully we'll be able to fix that in future semesters, and maybe a little bit in this semester. Next question. Those are my responses to them. I really want to emphasize that I really put a lot of thought into this as to my specific rationale for each of these decisions. You can disagree with them, that's fine. If you think I'm missing something, please let me know. And I can revise my responses here. So for the written questions, I've really just extracted a few sort of nuggets, things that I thought were worth responding to because I thought people would want a response to them specifically. On the next question, which is number 15, the question is: Do you usually understand what is expected of you preparing and participating in the class? 43 of the 47 respondents, 91% of the students said they did. The first word was yes in virtually every answer. 3 students said that they didn't necessarily feel adequately prepared for the essays, that they weren't expecting the kind of depth required of those. And, you know, that's a really interesting problem. And I think what I'm probably going to do to try to solve that in the future is give sample essay responses. In the past, I've left it kind of open-ended, and I give that one little practice test. Oh, here's kind of what a response looks like. And I think in the future, I probably want to give a little bit more detail on that. I think some people really appreciate that.
So that is just a little example of the kind of mid-semester evaluation response video that I'm talking about. So that was a clip of two separate videos. The first half of that was my response to the quantitative evaluation, so to the specific numbers being received. And you saw I superimposed the actual responses from the mid-semester evaluation on the screen. The second half was in responding to the qualitative responses. So this worked pretty shockingly well. This was actually 47 responses, but about 80 students in this particular section of this course where I did this time. And 3 of those students, after watching this video, and this video was 45 minutes long, by the way. This was 45 minutes of me talking about exactly what I felt about this thing. 3 students emailed me out of this class to actually disagree with things that they heard on there. And they actually varied. One said, I think you're going to do blank, and instead, I think this would be a better strategy. And that is never a conversation I have had with a student before. By saying, here was a problem in the course, and then I said, I think I'm going to try this out. And the student emails me back and says, you know, I think that could work, but here's what could be better. And it doesn't, again, necessarily mean that I'm going to listen to that particular student's advice, because you have all the normal problems with taking one student's advice. But it did give me a lot more information into the thought process of the student that I didn't have before, and it also influenced other decisions that I made further in the course. Another student that I thought was really interesting from this was one that disagreed with what another student said that I responded to in the video. In the video I said, one of the students said this particular assignment was too hard, there wasn't enough information available, I'm not sure how I could do that. And this student wrote back and said, that student is nuts, this is one of the best assignments that I've ever done, this really helped me, etc. And again, that's information I would have never received in an in-semester evaluation. In the end-of-semester evaluation, I just would have seen that first comment, I hated the assignment, and then would have been left wondering, what do I do with that? Did everybody hate that and nobody just mentioned it? What should I change in the future? But by doing it this way, by doing it with the mid-semester evaluation, I actually got that feedback at that stage. So that was really great. The specific mention of this then came in the end of semester evaluations, so I know that people were paying attention to it. Specifically commented, at least one student in the end semester evaluation said, really appreciated this dialogue, I felt like I was really heard, and I felt like my opinion was really valued. So that was great. So how did I actually do that? The practical side of this. The mid-semester survey itself is real easy. CLT has a whole set of mid-semester evaluation questions, which I think are based on end-of-semester evaluation questions. I'm not positive about that. At least partly based on those questions. So you can start there. There's actually a tool in Blackboard to import them wholesale, so you can just dump the whole thing right into your Blackboard course, and it actually doesn't even require very much clicking. It's, you literally go here, download a file, and then go into Blackboard, upload a file, and you're done. So at that point, though, you end up with a survey, which you create with the survey tool over there. And once you have that survey tool, you can modify it as needed. So modifying it is something that I think is really important, because this, if you really think of feedback as a process, if you really think of mid-semester evaluations as an addition to your normal year-to-year or semester-to-semester course updates, then that has to be this being part of that process is going to give you the most value. So thinking, this semester I changed blank, I should ask a question about it and just see generally how people responded to that, how people reacted to that. Again, not necessarily to take that as truth, but rather to start that dialogue with students about how that in particular went. The response videos are a little trickier. Fortunately, these days, making videos is much easier than it used to be. If you have access to a webcam, which is pretty much any laptop these days, then you can record a high quality, or at least sufficiently high quality response video to meet student expectations. There are plenty of free options, so as long as you have that computer, you're probably fine. Windows Movie Maker on the Windows side and iMovie on the Mac side. And if you have a laptop with a webcam, it probably came with its own software, so you can record your own videos anyway. So lots of free options available. Blackboard also introduced last version, or maybe version before last, can't recall, a built-in function to record videos directly into Blackboard. So I haven't actually tried that out myself yet, but that looks very promising as well. It looks like you can just go into Blackboard, hit create video, and then click record, and then you have a video. So it's just very easy at this point. In terms of style, this is something that I've talked about with a lot of faculty. There's a lot of worry about appropriately representing yourself in a video that's recorded for students to look at essentially permanently. But my experience has been with students is they don't particularly care about how fancy and flashy your videos are. In general, the YouTube expectation is fine. If it is clear video, if they can see you, and if it's clear audio, they can hear you, they're generally pretty happy with that. And I haven't received any complaints on it. So the way to make that good video then that meets the good sound and good lighting is to use your basic webcam. That's fine, but make sure you have lots of light and make sure it's quiet. This room, not a good room. You know why this room is not a good room? You can hear it. There's this strange hum in the background. If you have high quality recording equipment, that's not a problem. If you have a webcam, it is. So make sure you find a fairly noise isolated room. Brightly lit though, this room is actually lit pretty well, so this is the kind of thing you want. If you're in an office with a window, that's usually fine as long as you're facing the window so the light's coming on your face. If you try to record at night, that's when you hit problems. So if you try to record at night and there's no background light at all, then that means your video is going to be jerky and people aren't going to want to watch it. And if the students don't want to watch it, then you're not going to get the kind of feedback you want. So that's an important piece of this. You have to imagine yourself having a conversation with somebody that isn't talking back. As you saw from the video, it was just like I was just chatting, just talking. And that's really the strategy that you have to take. If you're stiff and formal, then they're going to interpret that in a stiff and formal way. So it has to be fluid. It has to be conversational. It must be, you must be projecting an image that you are just gathering information, just having to talk with them, and just want to know some facts about your course. That's the way to get that dialogue started. Informality, that is the key. So, the conclusions that I drew from all of this work on mid-semester evaluations, looking at the rating literature from biopsychology, looking at the performance appraisal literature from biopsychology, and organizational justice theory, all these things that I've been pulling in. One, mid-semester student evaluations can provide developmental feedback in a way that end-of-semester evaluations just can't. The setup of the administrative end-of-semester evaluations means you must always question why the students are filling them out. And that's really unfortunate, but it means that you can never really trust that this is an honest response about your teaching. It's probably sort of close-ish, but you can never really know if specific comments are accurate. You can never really know if the scores themselves actually reflect your ability that well. So using mid-semester evaluations gives you that greater power over that, to say, let's get rid of all that extra noise in these ratings. Let's get rid of any of the students that really loved or really hated me, and let's just get a good feeling, a good overall assessment of how students reacted. So that's why I like mid-semester evaluations. You can get a much better rating of what you want. Two, using mid-semester student evaluations as the opening move in a dialogue with students produces more targeted and valuable feedback. I can say quite definitively I have gotten more specific recommendations for this course that I've been doing this in, this large undergraduate course, than I have ever had in any other course I've ever taught. The idea that just having that video there, just having your face there saying, let's talk about the course, especially in an online course, which is what this was, really adds a human element to this interaction. You're not just a faceless grading machine, which is how online course instructors are sometimes viewed. But instead, you're actually a person that's actually thinking about their good. You're thinking about how to make the course good for them. You want them to learn. You want to help them learn. By taking this approach, then you can really communicate that. And you can draw them in to that human element so that they can be an active participant in the course. This helps everybody. It helps you, again, because you're getting more accurate ratings, you're getting more accurate information about your course, you're getting specific recommendations about what to do in the future. It helps your students because now they actually know what you're doing. And I think that's a really good, really important thing that we need to be doing. There's no reason to hide all of the work we do from the students, which is a somewhat common approach. And it helps the people that do make administrative decisions above these individuals. So especially when we're talking about peer instructional faculty, when we're talking about lecturers and adjunct faculty, where teaching is a lot of what they do, then that means that those ratings, those scores will be more accurate. You will actually get a better assessment of how students are reacting, how students are learning from the courses, and it helps everybody in that way. You help the people above, you help yourself, and you help your students. So that is what leads me to mid-semester evaluations. That's actually it. So, thank you. So we will move into, if there are any questions at this point. There's also a microphone that has to be handed to you if you have any.
I would just like to comment and commend you on this one, Richard, because I think it is critically important. Getting the feedback, especially for faculty who are relatively new to teaching, but I think it goes all the way through, no matter how experienced. Because especially faculty who are very engaged in the material themselves and have thought about it over and over, for over years, it's intuitively obvious that X is Y and so forth. Right? And to the students who've never heard it before, it is not necessarily. And so getting the feedback, are you approaching it the right way? Are you going too fast? Are you going too slow? Would you need more visuals or fewer or whatever it might be? Those kinds of, that feedback. And then making it clear to the students that you actually are making a course correction on the basis of their feedback. Then everybody gets more engaged in it from then on. So I would simply say not have it be too far into the course, but maybe around about that critical week 5, week 6 period when you're into it, but you're not. But there's still a ways to go. Is a good time to do that.
Oh yeah. Oh, it speaks directly to this idea that you want the students to complete it when they potentially can have an impact, and that'll maximize their motivation to interact with you. Oh, sure.
What would you say, based on student feedback, is the most important changes from your point of view that you think you've made in the course, responding directly to things that students have said in this feedback?
So, I don't know about most important, but I'll give you the biggest change. Which may be the most important. I'm still evaluating it now, which is why I say that, as to whether this was a good idea or not. So in this version of the course, as I mentioned, there were weekly quizzes, and they were low-stakes quizzes. So each quiz is worth 1% of their grade, very, very low stakes. Just mostly I wanted to make sure that week to week they were keeping up with the material so they wouldn't be surprised on exams. And what I found from the evals is that those, even though they were low stakes, which in my mind meant only 1%, you don't need to worry that much about this quiz, they worried a lot about those quizzes. Even though it was, in comparison, it would take 30, in the structure of the course, it would take 30 quizzes to equal an exam. So they were really overvaluing those quizzes. And my intention originally with the quizzes had been they'd use them as this learning opportunity. So as a result of that, over a couple of semesters, I came to this idea, based on their feedback, that I would alter it so that instead of being a one-time quiz, that they would instead be able to take it an unlimited number of times, but with a more stringent time limit. And so that's the biggest change. I mean, I changed 10 of the assessments in this course, and I'm currently evaluating it right now. So I just recorded the mid-semester evaluations a couple of weeks ago and saying, is this really how you're using these now that they really are intended to be developmental? And I in my weekly lecture videos in the beginning, I said the way you should be doing this is you should take the quiz one time, and I call them learning checks now. You should take the learning check one time, you should see how you do, you should note the areas that you're weak in, and then go back and review, and then take the learning check again at that point. And so I don't know if they're actually doing that. So now this semester, as part of this process, I'm now asking them in an open-ended question on the mid-semester evaluation, how are you using the learning checks? Are you just completing them one time, or are you actually using them iteratively to help you learn? And then, well, I haven't looked at it yet, so I don't know what's happened yet. But that's probably the most overarching kind of change that I've made. The example that was given in there is one I've added to. I've added a lot more review materials in terms of preparing for writing, because I was getting a lot of variance in writing quality on the paragraph answers in the exams, and I hadn't really thought about it as to why that was happening. And in one of the evaluations, somebody came back and said, if you want us to write 3 pages of response, then we don't have nearly enough time with the amount of time you're giving us. And I realized, I don't want you to write 3 pages of response to this thing. That's not even close to what I want you to do. So I added in example exam questions so that they could see, oh, this is about how much I write and about the detail level. And that's helped as well. Need the camera.
That's okay. I noticed that only about half of the people in your class responded to this. Do you think there's any sample bias there? If so, how do you think it affected the responses? For example,
Sure.
again, maybe disgruntled or happy students.
Sure. You know, it's better response rate than I usually get on end of semester evaluations, at least in the online courses. It's usually, I mean, at the high end, I've maybe hit 40%. It's usually around 30 or 20 or not, or worse than that, depending on the semester. So this is a better response rate than I usually get. There are still some sampling issues, which is true. In the mid-semester evaluation, they still evaluate what their anticipated grade is. That's one of the questions that's asked. And so there's still a pretty good variance in that. I haven't actually compared that to the end of semester evaluations or the actual grade distribution, which is a really interesting question. So I don't know. But that's a question that I could actually answer. So yeah.
Follow-up, is there a way to increase that response rate?
Well, 50% is through, I mean, I emphasize this many times. And part of this is also because it's an online course. In an in-person course, you have a little bit more face-to-face pressure that you can put on a student. It's like, you really should do this. And by having that face-to-face interaction, there's a little bit more, I think you're a little more likely to get responses. In the online course, my only paths to get that to happen are, one, course announcements, which I've already found out a number of students don't even read. Two, the weekly intro videos, which while that starts pretty enthusiastically, those numbers do drop over the course of the semester. The number of students that are watching those or the lecture videos, I mean, it's typical in any online course. You start to have drop off after a little bit. So yeah, I mean, trying to ensure that you are, again, presenting that human face is the best that I've been able to do. The first time I did this was 40 out of 80. The second time I did it, it was 75 out of 120-ish. So it was a little bit better response rate the second time around, but I've never had over 2/3. I think that's the best I've ever seen. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.